The heavy wooden doors of the courtroom creaked open, and a figure stepped hesitantly inside. It was a teenager, no older than 16 or 17, dressed in a faded gray hoodie that hung loosely over his thin frame. His jeans were scuffed and worn, and his sneakers had clearly seen better days. He glanced around nervously, his eyes darting between the stern faces of the courtroom officials, the imposing judge's bench, and the rows of benches filled with curious onlookers. His hands trembled slightly as he clutched a small, battered leather briefcase, worn at the edges as if it had been carried through countless journeys. The judge, a seasoned man with a sharp gaze and a no-nonsense demeanor, observed the teenager with a mixture of disbelief and amusement. His brow furrowed, and he exchanged a quick, skeptical glance with the bailiff standing nearby. It was clear the judge was silently questioning why someone so young, dressed so casually and out of place, would dare present themselves in such a formal setting. Whispers began to ripple through the courtroom. The prosecutor, a confident woman in a sharp suit, smirked knowingly and leaned over to whisper to her assistant, casting a patronizing glance at the teen. The courtroom spectators exchanged puzzled looks, some stifled laughter while others shook their heads in disbelief, assuming the teenager must be some misguided youth who had wandered in by mistake. Despite the weight of the judge's skeptical eyes and the room's low hum of amusement, the teenager took a deep breath and stepped forward. His movements were hesitant but purposeful, a stark contrast to the casual slouch of his hoodie. There was an unmistakable tension in the air, a silent challenge that none in the courtroom were yet aware of. The judge finally broke the silence, his voice sharp and dripping with condescension. "Son, are you sure you belong here? This isn't some kind of school project or mock trial." His words echoed through the courtroom, eliciting a few stifled chuckles from the spectators. The teenager didn't flinch. Instead, he lifted his chin slightly and gave a steady, calm reply, the first sign that there was far more to him than his appearance suggested. The prosecutor's smirk deepened as she caught sight of the teenager making his way to the defense table. Her sharp eyes took in every detail: the faded hoodie, the worn jeans, the battered leather briefcase that looked completely out of place amidst the polished wood and crisp suits of the courtroom. She exchanged a quick, knowing glance with the bailiff stationed nearby. The bailiff, a tall, imposing man with a stern face, nodded almost imperceptibly, a silent agreement passing between them that this young intruder was nothing more than a joke, someone who would soon be dismissed or removed. As the teenager approached, his steps measured but confident, the prosecutor leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice to a sharp whisper. "You do know this is a real court, right? This isn't a game or some after-school activity." Her words carried a tone that was both mocking and patronizing. She flicked a glance toward the defense table, where a stack of polished legal pads and neat folders awaited the actual defense counsel, none of which matched the teen's battered briefcase. The courtroom buzzed with a low murmur as more people took notice of the young defendant, or so it appeared. Spectators whispered amongst themselves, casting curious and often amused looks in his direction. The courtroom clerk tapped her pen against the desk, trying to suppress a smile, while the bailiff's gaze hardened, clearly ready to intervene if the teenager stepped out of line. The teenager stopped just before the defense table, setting his briefcase down gently. His fingers brushed over the worn leather, and then, with a steady hand, he flipped open the clasps. The sound of the briefcase opening echoed softly in the hushed courtroom, drawing the attention of everyone present. Inside were neatly organized folders, legal documents, and handwritten notes that suggested hours of preparation. The contrast between his casual appearance and the professionalism of his materials puzzled many. Without hesitation, the teenager addressed the judge, his voice calm but firm. "Your Honor, I would like to represent myself in this matter." The words hung in the air, shocking the courtroom into silence. The prosecutor's smirk faltered for just a moment, her eyes narrowing slightly as she registered the unexpected confidence behind the youthful face. The bailiff shifted uneasily, sensing that this was no ordinary case of a misguided youth trying to play lawyer. The judge's eyes narrowed as he leaned forward, gripping the edge of his bench. "You want to proceed pro se? At your age, do you even understand the gravity of this request?" he asked, his tone laced with incredulity. The courtroom was now fully engaged, all eyes locked on the teenager as he prepared to prove that there was far more to him than met the eye. The judge's lips curled into a slow, dismissive chuckle that echoed through the courtroom, a sound filled with disbelief and condescension. "Are you lost, son?" "This isn't a mock trial," he said, his voice carrying a sharp edge that caused several heads to turn and some spectators to smirk quietly. The room, already buzzing with curiosity, now filled with an undercurrent of amusement as the judge's words seemed to mock the teenager's very presence. The judge's gaze lingered on the young figure standing before him, arms folded loosely at his sides, not a hint of embarrassment or hesitation on his face. Instead, the teenager met the judge's eyes evenly, his expression calm and unreadable, as if he had heard the same doubt many times before and was ready for it. The judge's chuckle was met with silence from the teen, who simply waited patiently, refusing to be rattled. Around the courtroom, a few muffled laughs erupted from the gallery. Some of the spectators exchanged amused glances, convinced this was some sort of prank or that the boy had wandered into the wrong room. A woman near the back shook her head with a smile, whispering to the person next to her, "Who does he think he is, walking in here like that?" Others leaned forward, eager to see what would happen next. The prosecutor, still smirking, tapped her pen on the desk rhythmically, clearly enjoying the spectacle. She whispered to her assistant, "This is going to be over before it even starts." The bailiff, standing stoically near the judge's bench, shifted slightly, his eyes narrowing as he watched the teenager's steady demeanor. There was something in the teen's posture that didn't quite fit the profile of a confused or naive kid. The judge, sensing the growing attention, raised his gavel slightly but didn't bring it down. Instead, he continued with a tone dripping in sarcasm, "Are you here to entertain us, or do you have something serious to say?" His voice carried the weight of skepticism, but beneath it, there was a flicker of curiosity that even he didn't bother to hide. The teenager finally spoke, his voice clear and unwavering. "I'm here to represent myself, Your Honor. I'm fully prepared." The courtroom fell into a stunned silence. The judge's smirk faded just a bit as he regarded the teen more closely, trying to gauge whether this was a stunt or something more substantial. The murmurs of doubt shifted into whispers of intrigue, and the atmosphere changed. What had started as ridicule was beginning to feel like the prelude to something unexpected. The teenager calmly set his battered briefcase on the defense table and, with deliberate care, flipped it open. Inside were neat stacks of legal documents, folders meticulously labeled, and handwritten notes that looked painstakingly prepared. Each paper was edged with careful underlines and margin notes, reflecting hours, perhaps days, of study and research. The contrast between the rough exterior of the hoodie-clad boy and the professionalism of his materials caught many off guard. The courtroom's whispers died down as all eyes shifted from his unassuming appearance to the clear organization of his case. The judge, still skeptical but now noticeably intrigued, leaned forward on his bench. "You want to represent yourself?" he asked, voice sharp but tinged with curiosity. The teenager nodded without hesitation. "Yes, Your Honor. I am requesting to proceed pro se." His voice was calm, steady, and carried the quiet confidence of someone who had made this decision with careful thought. The prosecutor raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised, but she quickly masked it with a faint smile, ready to challenge this unexpected turn. The judge tapped his gavel lightly and said, "Proceeding pro se is not a decision to take lightly. You understand the responsibility, the risks involved." The teen met the judge's gaze steadily. "I do, Your Honor. I have prepared extensively, and I believe I can effectively present my case." The courtroom was unusually quiet now. The bailiff shifted, clearly taken aback by the teenager's maturity. Spectators exchanged puzzled looks, their earlier amusement fading into curiosity. Some leaned in to get a better look at the documents, noting the intricate legal language and case citations visible on the papers. The judge glanced briefly at the court clerk, who nodded in acknowledgement that the paperwork was in order. "Very well," he said, "but I will be monitoring your conduct closely. The court expects proper decorum, and any disruptions will be dealt with accordingly." The teenager responded with a respectful nod, then turned his attention to the case materials in front of him. As he began organizing the papers, a faint murmur rippled through the courtroom. What had started as a scene of ridicule was swiftly transforming into something unexpected, a challenge to every assumption made about him. The prosecutor straightened in her seat, her expression hardening with resolve. "This will be interesting," she muttered under her breath, already preparing to counter what she assumed would be a weak defense. But the teenager's eyes betrayed none of the doubt around him. He exuded a quiet assurance, as if he already knew he was exactly where he was supposed to be. As the trial commenced, the courtroom was tense with anticipation. The teenager stood confidently beside the defense table, flipping through his organized files with a practiced ease that belied his age. The prosecutor launched into her opening statement, outlining her case with the expected confidence, certain that the young defendant would be easily outmatched. But when it was the teen's turn to respond, the room fell into a stunned silence. With a clear, steady voice, the teenager began his argument, meticulously dissecting the prosecution's claims. His words were precise, each sentence carefully crafted and delivered with a calm authority that caught even the judge off guard. He cited legal precedents with ease, referencing cases and statutes that demonstrated not only a deep understanding of the law but also a sharp ability to apply it to the facts at hand. The judge, who had initially dismissed the teenager's presence as a mere curiosity, leaned forward, his eyes narrowing in focus. The objections the teen raised were well-founded and backed by solid legal reasoning. When the prosecution attempted to press forward, the teenager countered with well-timed objections, each one sustained by the judge. His knowledge of courtroom procedure was flawless. He knew when to speak, when to remain silent, and how to frame his arguments for maximum effect. The prosecutor's confident demeanor began to falter as the teenager methodically picked apart her evidence. She tried to interrupt, but the judge, impressed by the teen's poise and command of the room, allowed the young defense to continue unimpeded. The courtroom, which had been buzzing with skepticism and amusement just moments before, was now captivated by the unexpected display of legal skill. Witnesses who took the stand were carefully questioned by the teenager. His cross-examinations were incisive and strategic, exposing inconsistencies and flaws in the prosecution's case. The teenager's tone was polite but firm, and his questions were sharp and well-aimed, leaving little room for evasion or confusion. Throughout it all, the judge watched intently, his earlier doubts giving way to growing respect. The teenager wasn't just holding his own, he was dominating the courtroom with an expertise that few seasoned attorneys could match. Murmurs of surprise and admiration spread quietly through the gallery as the realization dawned on everyone present: the scruffy teen was no ordinary defendant. By the time the opening phase of his defense concluded, the courtroom had shifted. What began as a mockery was now a profound demonstration of talent, determination, and brilliance cloaked beneath the teenager's humble exterior. The courtroom fell into a heavy silence as the teenager stepped up to cross-examine the first witness, a key prosecution officer whose testimony was critical to the case. The witness, a seasoned professional used to facing experienced attorneys, initially seemed confident, perhaps even smug, as he began recounting his version of events. But the teenager's sharp gaze never wavered, and his voice, calm yet commanding, immediately set a different tone. With a series of carefully crafted questions, the teenager methodically exposed inconsistencies in the officer's testimony. He asked for precise details, times, locations, exact wording, and when the witness stumbled or gave vague answers, the teenager didn't hesitate to press further. Each follow-up question was pointed, designed to peel back layers of uncertainty and highlight contradictions. The courtroom watched, mesmerized, as the teenager's skillful interrogation left the witness visibly flustered. The prosecutor leaned forward, her jaw tightening as she observed the witness struggle under the teen's relentless scrutiny. It was clear this wasn't just youthful enthusiasm. The teenager was wielding a deep knowledge of legal tactics and evidence handling that stunned everyone. The judge's expression shifted from initial skepticism to a mixture of surprise and respect. He observed quietly, letting the teenager lead the exchange with minimal interruption. The teenager maintained an impeccable balance of politeness and assertiveness, never raising his voice or appearing aggressive, but clearly in control. His questions were precise, logical, and structured to corner the witness into admitting gaps and weaknesses in the prosecution's case. The witness's earlier confidence crumbled under this pressure, and by the end of the cross-examination, he was forced to concede several key points that undermined his credibility. Whispers rippled through the courtroom as the teenager returned to his seat, his demeanor calm and composed. Even some of the prosecution's supporters exchanged surprised glances, acknowledging the unexpected turn of events. The judge cleared his throat, nodding slightly in approval, signaling that the teenager had made a strong impact. The courtroom atmosphere had changed drastically. What had started as a casual mockery of a young defendant had evolved into a serious legal battle, with the teenager demonstrating mastery far beyond his years. His performance in cross-examination was not just impressive, it was a revelation. The prosecutor was clearly rattled, the judge intrigued, and the audience captivated by the unfolding drama. As the trial continued, it became evident to all that this was no ordinary teenager. Behind the hoodie and casual demeanor was a sharp mind, an astute legal strategist, someone who had come not just to participate but to win. The judge sat back in his chair, his eyes narrowing as he studied the teenager with a mixture of disbelief and growing respect. The courtroom had witnessed an astonishing transformation, from a scruffy, hoodie-clad youth to a poised and commanding presence capable of dismantling the prosecution's case piece by piece. Now, he couldn't hide his curiosity any longer. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with genuine intrigue. The teenager met the judge's gaze without hesitation. "I'm a licensed attorney, Your Honor," he replied calmly. "I was admitted through the bar's special prodigy program." His tone was matter of fact, as if the claim were the most natural thing in the world. The judge's eyebrows shot up, surprise flashing across his face. He motioned to the courtroom clerk, who quickly accessed a database terminal to verify the statement. As the clerk typed, the room buzzed with whispers. Spectators exchanged incredulous glances, the prosecutor stiffened, suddenly on the defensive. The bailiff's expression shifted from suspicion to cautious acknowledgement. After a moment, the clerk looked up and announced, "The credentials are valid, Your Honor. This individual is indeed licensed to practice law." The judge exhaled slowly, leaning forward as he absorbed the weight of this revelation. "I must say," he began, "I didn't expect this level of competence from someone so young, especially appearing like this." He gestured toward the teenager's casual attire, a slight smile breaking through his previously stern demeanor. "You've clearly worked hard to prepare." The teenager nodded respectfully. "Thank you, Your Honor. I understand the skepticism. I chose this appearance deliberately to challenge assumptions and to focus attention on the arguments rather than appearances." The courtroom was silent for a moment, the atmosphere shifting from disbelief to admiration. The prosecutor, though visibly unsettled, recovered her composure and nodded slowly, acknowledging the unexpected opponent before her. The judge tapped his gavel lightly, bringing the room to order. "Very well. Proceed as counsel." He looked back at the teenager. "But remember, the courtroom demands respect and professionalism at all times." With a calm, assured smile, the teenager replied, "Understood, Your Honor." The courtroom erupted quietly with murmurs of amazement and approval as the judge's skepticism gave way to genuine respect. In that moment, the teenager was no longer just a curious anomaly. He had claimed his place in the courtroom not by age or appearance, but through undeniable skill, knowledge, and poise. The entire room seemed to recognize that something extraordinary was unfolding before their eyes. A young genius attorney, disguised in humble clothes, commanding the respect of the law itself. The judge sat back in his chair, the weight of the revelation settling over the courtroom like a sudden, unexpected storm. His eyes scanned the official record displayed on the screen before him, a certified license issued. Under the bar's special prodigy program, a rare and highly selective initiative for exceptionally gifted young attorneys. The teenager before him, once dismissed as a mere curiosity or prank, was in fact a bona fide lawyer, licensed and fully capable of practicing law. A low murmur spread through the courtroom as word of the verification passed from the judge to the spectators. Gasps of surprise echoed softly, mixed with whispered exclamations of admiration. The prosecutor's confident facade faltered as she exchanged a glance with her colleagues, who looked equally stunned. Even the bailiff, usually stoic and unflappable, seemed momentarily taken aback. The judge cleared his throat, his voice carrying a mix of astonishment and newfound respect. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered under his breath, shaking his head slightly as if still trying to process the reality. The courtroom erupted in a wave of applause and murmurs of approval, a spontaneous recognition of the teenager's remarkable display of intellect and courage. The teenager, standing tall despite his casual attire, allowed himself a small, modest smile. He had anticipated skepticism but not the outright dismissal he faced initially. Yet now, in this moment, he had shattered every preconception, proving that true skill and knowledge transcend age and appearance. The judge rapped his gavel sharply to restore order, his tone firm yet respectful. "Let this be a lesson to us all: never judge a book by its cover." Your preparation and poise are commendable, and the court recognizes your right to proceed." He nodded towards the teenager. "Continue with your defense." As the trial resumed, the courtroom's atmosphere had transformed. What was once an environment tinged with doubt and mockery had shifted into one of respect and serious attention. The spectators leaned in, eager to witness the continued unfolding of a legal prodigy's skill. Even the prosecution approached the case with renewed caution, clearly acknowledging the formidable opponent they now faced. The teenager's journey from an underestimated outsider to a respected advocate had captivated everyone present. It was a story of brilliance cloaked in humility, of perseverance challenging prejudice, and of a young mind rising to claim its rightful place in the hallowed halls of justice. The courtroom, once skeptical, was now witness to a remarkable testament. Genius often arrives in the most unexpected forms.